What is going on, all you awesome super aficionados? This is the Heroes and Mutants podcast. I'm Nick with my co-hosts
Jimmy, also known as James, also known as Thomas, also known as Rivera.
Jeez.
and last but not least, the ever-loving, super cool.
Yeah, you got Eric here. You might know me as Kiros from the Quickscope podcast. But yeah, we're excited about this one. So
Definitely. Let's get started with the news that has developed this week. We had our first look at Luke Fox as Batwing revealed for season 2 of Batwoman. What did you guys think of his design?
It looks interesting.
yeah, I think this design looks cool.
Looks pretty faithful to the comic as far. I think it was like issue 20 of his initial run, where the costume looks more what it was kind of designed from or taken inspiration from. I kind of do miss that classic kind of yellow that he had with it. I was kind of hoping they would have went for that, but I think the design of the costume looks pretty cool, looks sleek, looks awesome. Although the helmet kind of reminds me of Optimus Prime. Somebody pointed that out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they did really good with the suit, especially because it's supposed to be more of a high-tech suit anyway, like from the comics. And I know he has that really cool, like steel-looking blue suit.
Yeah,
with
that was the
blue
one
vest.
cool too.
Yeah, that it's almost like reminiscent of like Nightwing in some sense. But even then, I think it looks good for now. I haven't caught up on Batwoman yet, so I think it's interesting that they're introducing more of like the Bat group, the Bat family, and all that.
Like Batman Incorporated.
Yeah, Batman Incorporated, but Batman's nowhere to be seen. So that I think that's really interesting that they're kind of going that route. And I mean, you saw success with that before, right? With like Gotham. I liked Gotham, and I thought that was cool.
So did I, but I mean,
yeah.
What you're pointing out is going to be very relevant a little later on.
Oh,
I guess, yeah.
Super.
Yeah.
A good point right now. I think it looks interesting. It looks good. Like Eric, I haven't really caught up on Batwoman, and I admit I have a hesitance with a lot of CW stuff. I have a hesitance with the programming because I love DC Comics, but they tend to have a soap opera-ish, melodramatic, teenage flair to them that always it's kind of strange with me, and that just seems to be a feature of CW content in general, and it always makes me hesitant on a lot of their DC stuff. I mean, The Flash was good. The Flash was actually a good one up to a point.
First few seasons.
Okay, up to a point. Up to a point, but it's just that CW connection has me very hesitant. If it were on HBO Max, like a Max exclusive, that might be a different story.
Yeah,
definitely. I think it's cool because Luke Fox as Batwing is one of the better additions to the mythos in the last 10 years. He first came out during the run of the New 52 and the whole Batman Incorporated storyline. And obviously he's a very capable individual, was a military guy, and in this high-tech suit is more of Batman, like the Batman's version of a Tony Stark suit, or a Batman-inspired Iron Man suit, essentially. So it is cool to see that, and they're bringing in this character. And I'm like you guys, I have not seen the first season of Batwoman, heard a lot of bad things, and still hesitant from that standpoint that it is under the CW umbrella, and we know how things have turned out and how bad Arrow was at a certain point because it just had so much potential and had a lot of good things going for it. And then just that soap opera love triangle took over, and I just became disinterested after a certain point and didn't really care for stuff like that anymore.
Not that I don't have a problem with love stories and superhero mythology. I think stuff like that's important. I don't like when it becomes the focus and it becomes that melodramatic. I think that's the difference. I'm okay with love stories and superhero against that. It's just I don't really care for how the CW chooses to tackle that stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because my favorite show out of the Arrowverse is the DC's Legends of Tomorrow, just because it doesn't take itself too seriously. And you do have some of that like romance going on in there, but I just think it's more of it's kind of like paying more homage to the comics, to like the older age of comics when they're just getting into random problems, and I find that really cool, and I thought that they did well in that sense. But yeah, when it comes to Arrow, Flash, and Batwoman, I mean, I watched a lot of Arrow and Flash the first few seasons, but then it got to a certain point, like you mentioned, James, where you just stop watching it. I actually go back for all the crossover events and just watch the crossover events.
That makes sense.
So I did catch a glimpse of Batwoman, right? Because she was in one of the most recent crossover events, and I liked their take on it. But as I'm sure you guys have probably covered this, like that actress is no longer Batwoman, so they're bringing someone else in, and I think it's already had issues to begin with, like after the first season. So maybe bringing in a new character like that will bring, just get an audience to kind of start looking at it more.
Definitely.
So yeah, we'll see where it goes from here, though.
Definitely. Moving on, it's been revealed that Marvel is going to kill off Doctor Strange with the death of Doctor Strange that's going to be releasing this fall. And
comic books.
Comic books, not, yeah.
So all you fans out there, stay calm. Don't lose your shit.
It's going to be written by Jed McKay, who worked on Black Cat and Moon Knight, with artwork by Lee Garbett, who worked on Captain Marvel. So it's going to be a 5-issue epic that will tell the final chapter in the life of Doctor Strange. And it's actually kind of funny because McKay said, what happens to the world if Doctor Strange isn't in it? It's a question that I'm excited to show people the answer to in Death of Doctor Strange. Strange has been a Marvel fixture from the early days, but now his time has run out. And as a Strange fan, it's been my bittersweet privilege to shepherd him through his last day and the effects that snowball out of it. We've cooked up a whale of a story to send Strange off with, and I can't wait for people to join us on it.
I mean, it makes sense that this would be happening because in the comics, he's like the Sorcerer Supreme. And that's something that people in the Marvel Universe are always gunning for. So whoever holds that title is always going to have a short lifespan just because so many people are after it. Like most things in comics, I doubt it's going to be permanent. I'm sure sometime in the future it can be resurrected or reintroduced somehow. But it's a logical step for the comics to make.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. This is particularly interesting because Doctor Strange is his own namesake, right?
Exactly.
Like Doctor Strange is his name. The comics aren't called Sorcerer Supreme, or that's not his superhero name. So unlike like Captain America, which the mantle can be passed on to someone else, as we've seen in the MCU, the mantle of Doctor Strange really can't be passed on. That's his actual name. So how they tackle that will also be interesting, and to see like, yes, who's going to get Sorcerer Supreme, because there always has to be a Sorcerer Supreme.
And it's not necessarily somebody with good intentions. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, because I'm sure like you saw in the MCU and the movies that other people were trying to get that title. So yeah, we'll see where that goes. I think it's going to be a really interesting story to follow. I'm definitely going to be looking into those issues, and because just Doctor Strange as a whole is such a fascinating character to me. And one of like the original characters that really piqued my interest, especially because he dives into like the magic and like the celestial aspects of the Marvel universe. So that's going to be really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's funny because you had brought that up too, because I didn't really know a whole lot about this character before his film came out and Benedict Cumberbatch was cast as him. So I remember too, just being a kid, you hear things. I remember just playing the Avengers game, the Ultimate, trying to think of the video game that came out.
Ultimate Alliance?
Like Ultimate Alliance, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you would have Doctor Strange, and I was like, so why, if he's a magician, if he harbors magic as a power source, why is he called Doctor? And then not really knowing that whole thing. And it's funny too, because they had that aspect in the film where the Ancient One says Master Strange, and he's all like, kind of takes offense, like, no, it's Doctor. And that whole thing too, like, you can't just pass on that title. He's not Master Strange, have somebody take over. He's Doctor Strange. So there's a whole lot of uniqueness associated with this character where you can't just have someone else take on the mantle of Doctor Strange. They can take on the mantle of the Sorcerer Supreme, but they can't become Doctor Strange in a sense.
Like the Green Lantern or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I felt like the timing is a little bit interesting, especially when they're building up for the Multiverse of Madness. I don't know if that really came into play with their decision to kill off Doctor Strange, but the whole timing of it is a little bit weird and is a little bit I'm wondering on.
Okay, now that you said that, I didn't consider this before. When exactly are these issues going to come out that that kill off Doctor Strange? Do you know when about?
Well, it's gonna be released in the fall, and it just says a 5. Hold on, let me pull it up. It just says a 5-issue epic.
Okay, Eric, do you know when the Doctor Strange movie's coming out?
Doctor Strange movie? That's supposed to be in the holidays, right? End of this year?
I thought so.
Yeah.
I believe so too. I mean, a lot of times.
I thought it was like November-ish, or if I don't.
Around the holidays. They usually get a movie out there during the holidays.
They do, and Marvel's going to want to capitalize off of, because their comic books, I'm not saying that it sends the comic sales through the roof, but they do make more money when whatever comic book movie is out.
Exactly.
That comic is going to make more money. So if they plan on, I don't know, maybe that will be when he comes back, around when the movie comes around, it would be kind of a good promotional tie-in. But I don't see Marvel not keeping the Doctor Strange character around.
Exactly.
As a big movie directed by Sam Raimi that's going to be this big crossover event is coming out. So there is something going on there. They have some kind of plans to bring him back already.
Yeah,
it's actually going to be March 25th, 2022 is when the film is going to come out.
Damn it. Okay, so
after the holidays. Okay.
Actually, but still, that gives it enough time that he's dead long enough in that universe that they could make it a big comic book event where Doctor Strange returns.
Well,
exactly.
What I have seen is, especially with Marvel Comics, is I have seen them like specifically say this is a tie-in comic to the MCU.
Exactly.
Like you have like the one-shots and all of that are like their own isolated stories. Even with like video games, right? You saw there was a Marvel season in Fortnite, and they had tie-in comics, and Marvel is really like open about saying this is a tie-in to this specific storyline. It has nothing to do with the greater continuity of Marvel that we're currently working on. So I have a feeling that if they haven't said either now or when these issues come out that this is tying into the MCU, I don't think it will. I don't think those two universes would cross over without it being marketed that way and explicitly mentioned.
I think it's more like Brian Michael Bendis's Ultimate Spider-Man, which Marvel had launched kind of somewhat at the time coincide with the new Spider-Man movies that were coming out, the Sam Raimi ones. And that was their attempt, as it's being brought into like to the greater pop culture consciousness, to relaunch it for a new generation. So it could be something like that.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, I mean, you saw the Ultimates come out around the same time as the Avengers too. So yeah.
Yeah, see.
Yeah.
That was just the one thing that I had thought of. Just the timing of it was a little bit weird, and the way they announced it and building up to it. And then we're going to have the Multiverse of Madness coming out at the beginning of next year. Like, it just seemed like it was all predetermined, like it was planned for some kind of marketing aspect to build up more for this film. That's just to me what it kind of seemed like. I'm sure there was like that intention behind it in some capacity. But that's going to be interesting. We're going to read it, and we'll see how that turns out and who's going to take over next as the Sorcerer or Sorceress Supreme.
Yep.
And moving on from that, Aquaman 2 has a confirmed title, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. That's going to be pretty cool. And DC, Warner Brothers, has just announced that Blue Beetle will be an HBO Max exclusive, which is pretty cool. But it also is going to fall into what we're going to talk about later today. Jimmy knows where that's going. And last but not least, we actually had our first episode of Loki drop. So what did you think about it, Eric?
It's okay for now. It's the first episode, so I mean, you know, especially with all these new Marvel shows, every single episode ends with some type of like cliffhanger, like going into the next episode, trying to create anticipation for the next episode. I think they did a good job of tying in or explaining to the audience how we get this Loki, especially since we know that Loki dies in the movies. So they do a really good job of setting the stage of who this Loki is, where he comes from, and kind of set the plot into motion of what the rest of the show is gonna show. So I think it was a solid first episode. for a new series that's trying to establish this is the story and that our plot and everything is going to be inside of this space. I think it did a good job at that. So nothing mind-blowing, nothing spectacular in my opinion.
Exactly.
But overall, I mean, and Tom Hiddleston is Loki. It's always going to be good, right? So
I have a question for you. Like, and this is just me. I'll admit I have not watched it. I will catch up on it this week. But how does it compare to the first episode of WandaVision and the first episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier? Because I think I'm in the minority. I actually think both of those shows had really good first episodes. I didn't see any problems with the way that is. Would you compare it to that, or
is that the minority?
Huh?
Yeah, more so with WandaVision. A lot of people complained about that show all the way through.
Yeah, all the way through. But I noticed a lot of people, most people I talk to tell me that Captain and the Winter Soldier got better after an episode or two. I was like, what? I thought it was good from the beginning.
It was good from the start.
Yeah, so
I would compare it to Captain Winter Soldier, definitely. Okay. Because I thought they did a really good job there as well in setting the story up with the two characters and saying this is where they're at right now and this is where it's going. Mm-hmm. So, and whereas WandaVision is kind of just like a mind fuck, like what the hell's going on?
What's going on? Yeah.
Yeah. Which I loved. I love that. My wife and I were watching WandaVision and we loved the direction they took it. We thought it was awesome. But I think it's definitely more along the lines of Falcon Winter Soldier on what they're trying to accomplish in like this specific story. I think they're just setting the stage right now. So, but I thought it was really good. I think because it involves, and the commercials say this, it involves like a time agency. It's called a time variance agency. And I mean, you can compare that to a bunch of other time agencies, right? Like Doctor Who or even
Jean-Claude Van Damme, Time Cop.
Yeah, or Lily and I actually mentioned that it seems the most familiar to the Umbrella Academy. Their time institute, right? We thought there was a lot of similarities between the Umbrella Academy's group and the one in the MCU. But even then, I think it does a good job at establishing the boundaries of time travel in the MCU, because I know that was a huge question after Endgame. So they answer a lot of questions in the first episode on how this ties into, or how Loki ties into the movies. And I think from now on, they're trying to establish this is where we're going moving forward. And also, I mean, Owen Wilson as a brand new character, I think he did an amazing job. It's really refreshing to see Owen Wilson in the MCU.
Definitely.
It's a very original choice, I'll say that.
Definitely. I mean,
especially for Morbius.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would have never, when they first announced that, I was like, I would have never considered.
I never would have either. It was weird seeing him in the trailer in this type of setting. But for me, I would definitely agree with Eric, but I think that's just for that matter that WandaVision had so much uniqueness and originality associated with it that it's hard for shows to follow that same mold where it's just what the hell is going on with her powers and what she was able to do and everything going on in that world and that story they were telling. It was very unique in that sense. So I think it's more compared or closer to Captain America and the Winter Soldier for that sake. And they do a good job building up, showing where Loki is, what's going on, the problem that they have, driving the story forward and where it could be. Well, we still have a lot of questions on where it could possibly go. There's still those unanswered stuff and on those. So it's from a storytelling perspective, it's still good. Like that whole thing we had talked about where WandaVision was good for me because it was pushing the story and telling something new each time, even though people were pissed off because they weren't getting everything in and all the information or what was going on right away. And I think that was maybe them being smothered by binge watching shows right away the minute that they drop. So from that sense, it is good for me and I like it from that. And it feels more closer to what Captain and Winter Soldier is. And for me, it just really goes to show just how great of an actor Tom Hiddleston is. And in my opinion, he's probably the best actor in the MCU. You know, he has in the very beginning when the TVA find him and he's like puffing off his chest like, I'm the god of mischief, you guys are below me. But when he's confronted with just how powerful these people really are, you see that very human quality in him where he kind of fidges like with that whole thing with this ticket where he sees the guy get vaporized and he's all like, my ticket's here. He's not somebody who's always puffing out his chest and always walking around that alpha badass. He kind of is very realistic in that sense where he sees things and he's able to adjust his behavior according to it.
Did you say Tom Hiddleston is the best actor in the MCU right now?
I think so.
That's a bold statement.
That's a bold statement.
It's Vin Diesel.
I don't have time to think about that, but Vin Diesel. No, I'm going to think about that, and I'll get back to you next week after I.
And that's not a slouch, or that's not something that I say because he's just so much over the top. But obviously, Robert Downey Jr., a lot of great actors and performers. But in just my opinion, I think it's more so because he makes this character so likable, so redeemable, even with the stuff that he's done. And you see a lot of those vulnerabilities because I think that was the hardest thing on what people had to latch onto is they liked his arc and where he went at the conclusion of Infinity War. But then he's able to just kind of confront it and able to just fast forward through it. And you see his growth and you see him reacting when he finds out what happened to his mother. You see him just react right away. And that's something he did in the original timeline where he just reacted right away. And you see him actually confronting with the wrongs that he has done in his life and being headed and taking. Well, sorry, I don't know we're not getting into spoilers, but just in general, like confronting those issues. And I really like it, man. It got really high ratings, and I see why. And Tom Hiddleston is great as this character. And by the way, I really liked they included that myth of DB Cooper with it secretly being Loki in disguise. That was really cool. I know that was in the trailer.
Jimmy hasn't watched it, dude. You're ruining stuff.
Well, that was in the trailer. That was in the trailer.
Answer the question.
That was in the trailer.
It is in the trailer.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the trailer, so I'm watching closely to Loki because I really don't want it to be kind of like a buddy cop thing between Mobius and Loki. Like
that's
I wanted
what they're
to.
hinting at. That's really
I know, and I feel like that it might just be that where Mobius is obviously trying to control Loki, and it's almost giving me like Lucifer vibes. If you've ever watched that show, where like Lucifer is helping out the cops, but they're also trying to control him, making sure that he's staying within his range. So I feel like it might go that route, but I think there's going to be touches of like an overarching story that's going to be really important, not just to Loki, but to the MCU as a whole. Again, I saw the chemistry there between Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston at first. So I really hope that this Mobius Loki storyline goes somewhere cool, and really looking forward to seeing more.
Definitely. So make sure you guys check out Loki. It's going to be released every Wednesday. There's a lot of good stuff, and we're going to give a full breakdown analysis when the season finale hits. So stay tuned for that. Yeah. And today I wanted to talk about something a little bit different. It's something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and I remember what's jump-started this topic for me was when Batman Soul of the Dragon, the animated film, was having promos on IG, it's going to be released in January. A common consensus amongst most people in the comments was everybody was complaining that Batman gets too much of the spotlight. There's so much Batman in pop culture and in the media. They should get Warner Brothers should give other characters a spotlight, lesser known characters. So I kind of wanted that to be an open-ended discussion. Like, this isn't just limited to the Batman, but more the popular characters, comic characters who dominate pop culture and are so relevant and have so many different forms of media, either ongoing or in development, or who just seem to dominate more so than a lot of other characters. So I kind of wanted that to be the discussion on today. And this is actually something I ran a poll on where I asked people, do you feel Batman is so popular it causes WB/DC to become so reliant on the character and be less hesitant to give other characters a spotlight in pop culture? 63% said yes to 37%. So I feel like that's a common complaint that a lot of people talk about and a lot of people feel. So just open discussion about it. What do you guys think, pros, cons, and Why is that?
Well, as a diehard Batman fan,
Exactly.
I have a hard time seeing that as a negative thing. Now, having said that, the complaints are legitimate. There's a lot of interesting DC characters, and there's other aspects of the DC universe that I think are worth delving into, and I think are worth exploring. But it comes down to something that I think is just simply business, is that Batman is extremely popular and he's a guaranteed moneymaker no matter what. So if you're a business person thinking about this, you're sitting around thinking like, yeah, we want to like build up the DC universe and make characters, but we got to make money now. I can just see a business executive like, fuck it, just break out Batman again. We know that is going to tie, as long as we break that out, it will make some sort of money back no matter what. And I also think it has to do with the universe itself of Batman that gives it kind of a wide appeal. I have a lot of friends and I have family members who don't really care for superhero media or comic books, but like Batman. And I think it's because it has a lot of elements that go beyond comic books. There's a criminal element, the underworld element to it, where I have one of my best friends is primarily into like mafia related things and anything that's gritty or street level, and he doesn't care for superheroes, but he likes Batman because Batman incorporates so much of that into it. I think it's also something that people relate to because it's one of the only superheroes that actually doesn't have any superpowers at all. I think people look to that as kind of like an inspiration. It's hard to get inspired by somebody like, say, Superman, who is an alien that is gifted and born with all these gifts, as opposed to somebody who suffers through not that Superman doesn't suffer through tragedy. He does. It's a very big part of who he is as a person. But we've all been to that point where you've suffered blowbacks, tragedies, where you have to come back and try to build yourself back stronger. And I think that character is something that's inspiring in that sense, where Spider-Man is kind of relatable too, but most of us are not going to be bitten by a radioactive spider that's going to gift us with powers or anything like that. It's the work and he is a billionaire, so I know the average person can't do everything that Batman or Iron Man, another good example, could do. But I think there's a lot of that human element and the idea of becoming the best version of yourself after facing unimaginable adversity. I think there's a lot more to it than that, but what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's always important to also look back at the comic books, right? And I try to think, why were the Batman comics so much more popular than the other DC comics? And this is like outside of media with like TV and all that. And I think it kind of goes back to a lot of the points that you were making, right? That he's a man with no powers. He has this tragic backstory that everyone knows the backstory, right? Like everyone knows that his parents were killed in an alley, and that kind of fuels him to become Batman. And so I think it's a lot of what we see in media, on TV, movies, it's a reflection of what we see in the comic books, right? Like you're not going to tell me that Batman sales are going to be close to Green Lantern sales in the comic books. There's no way, and that's going to reflect at the higher levels too, that in media, and it's the same with Spider-Man. Spider-Man comics sold like crazy, right? Spider-Man was a character that was initially like made for like teenage boys and for them to buy all those up, and then when the movies came out, obviously that's where the movie execs are going to gravitate towards. They're not going to say, oh, give me an MCU character that's not well known. They're like, no, I'm going to make a movie. Give me the best MCU character you got, or the best Marvel character you got. So I think it's important to note those things. But not only that, I would say that it's okay for them to get as much attention as they do, because as long as they're incorporating or even doing cameos of other heroes, right? Like you're bringing in other characters that are lesser known. Like right now, how many people knew who Falcon was? Right? Like not many. Like I knew who Falcon was because I was a big Captain America fan, but without having seen him in the Captain America films, and then now his own show, and now he's the new Captain America, like people now know who he is. And having someone like Captain America being used to introduce other characters like that, like him or the Winter Soldier, I think that's really cool, and I think that's why it's important that we have those like mainstays of heroes, because they're the ones that are going to pull the others up. It's not like, hey, let's move him out of the way to make room for others. That's not necessarily how I see media working.
So in a way, do you think Batman for a lot of people is the gateway drug into the rest of the DC universe?
Yes,
it
for sure.
Was for me. That's what made me a fan of the DC universe, just because Batman occupied the DC universe. Therefore, I want to know all about that universe, which is why I became a Superman fan, and why I love Superman. Why I got into Wonder Woman and the Flash and characters like that. I would not have the same interest if Batman isn't one that spurred it. And still my number one, but it's what made me a comic book fan, and what
exactly.
Yeah. Like I was gonna say I really like Constantine, and I went back and read Hellblazer because it's such a cool novel. But again, my introduction to him was through Batman. Like I would have never known Constantine if it wasn't for the times that him and Batman have collided, right? And I think that's also really cool to see. I mean, Nick, with Nightwing, would you know who Nightwing is if it wasn't for Batman?
That's exactly what I was gonna say, and I definitely, obviously, would never have. You kind of have to, if you don't, it's hand in hand. If you know Nightwing, you know Batman. You know Batman, you might not even know Nightwing, and that's just go. And I think really understanding that connection makes you appreciate that hero more, because here's somebody who was trained by him, but who is still one of the most trusted heroes behind Superman. Like he essentially had all of his strengths, but he didn't adopt any of his weaknesses, and he held on to the person that he was at his core, Dick Grayson. So I think knowing that connection and knowing that Batman was the one to first train him and first bring him in, I think having that understanding makes you appreciate that character, makes you understand him more.
I also think with Batman, what makes it so marketable is not so much Batman himself. It is Batman himself, but he has a universe of characters that fascinate the general public and pop culture at large. And I would say the second most popular character that Rogues Gallery, as they call them, would probably be Spider-Man's. But like, I don't think there's any Rogues Gallery who's penetrated pop culture the way that Batman is. The Joker is almost iconic as Batman is. Harley Quinn has completely taken on a life of her own as a character of her own series. Catwoman is iconic. The Riddler is iconic. The Penguin is iconic. I don't think that the majority of superheroes, and as much as I love Doc Ock and Green Goblin, I don't think that they have the same, they're like pop culture mainstays the way that the Joker and Catwoman are. So it's a very easy universe to exploit because people are fans of the Batman universe, period. Nightwing, who Nick is training to become Nightwing, by the way, he has his own. By the way, I have another friend named Nick who's also obsessed with Nightwing. And
yeah, that works.
I'm not making that up. That's a true story. But I just think that it has such a vast universe that appeals to people. I mean, Gotham was a popular show, and Batman, yes, he's in it. You see Bruce Wayne mostly as a kid, but it's mostly dependent on Commissioner Gordon. Commissioner Gordon is something of a pop culture icon. You could explore that character. I mean, Harley Quinn, HBO Max series is great, and in the DCEU, as they call it, Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn has taken on a life of her own, where Harley Quinn, who started off as like second string to the Joker, is popular enough to carry her own series and get her own cosplays, and people wear her shirts. And by the way, here we go. Yeah, it's a universe that's infinitely exploitable because it's loaded with characters who are almost as popular as the main character themselves. And you could do stuff just about those characters and exclude Batman. Look at the Joker movie. $1 billion worldwide. Bruce Wayne has a minimal part in it at best, and it's when he's a little kid, all just off of the Joker itself. So it's just a universe that is infinitely exploitable because no other superhero's universe has penetrated pop culture the same way that Batman's has.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just really funny to me too, because I think the thing where I really realize this and to really put into perspective for me was this, in this next year, we're going to have 4 different actors portray Bruce Wayne in a live action setting. Obviously, you have Ian Glenn, who plays the older Bruce Wayne in the Titans universe. Obviously, you have Ben Affleck and Michael Keaton coming back for their versions of Batman in the Flash film, and then Robert Pattinson in a separate continuity with the Batman. And when you really think about it, that's 4 different actors portraying a live action Bruce Wayne. That's just crazy to me. And then with this whole announcement that Blue Beetle is going to be an HBO exclusive, I was just talking over with Jimmy where I mentioned that the other day. I'd said, you know, they would never do something like this for the Batman, where that would be solely an HBO Max exclusive. That would be something that they would for sure release in theaters. They're not just going to have it on a streaming site. So that just is really something that goes to show the powerhouse and Batman the mainstay of this character. Then that he's a brand in himself. And to put things into perspective for people, when the MCU first started off, it wasn't the big, huge, mega brand that it is today. In phase 1, the first Iron Man did close to $600 million. But it wasn't until the Avengers where they finally broke that, where a Marvel film finally broke $1 billion. I mean, that was because it was a collection of all those heroes and was a live action comic book universe brought to life. But if you look at like the Incredible Hulk in 2008, that also came out that year. It didn't even do $300 million. And also Thor, Captain America, those weren't anywhere near the kind of money that they were making now. It was just insane to really see that and to show people that Thor was somewhat pretty successful. He had 449, but Captain America, the first Avenger, was 370 million. Iron Man 2 was a little bit better with 620, but it wasn't until that point of where people really started to trust the brand and started to see and put in a lot of trust and say, we believe in everything they do. We're going to go out. It has the Marvel banner, the MCU banner attached to it. We're going to go see it. But in 2008, when the first Iron Man and when the Incredible Hulk came out, there was a superhero film that broke $1 billion. The first time that a comic book film broke $1 billion. You guys know which movie that is?
The Dark Knight.
Exactly. So I think when you get all of that into perspective and you understand it, it's not hard to see why they're pushing Batman so much more than a lot of other characters and why he has so many. And then not only that, we're going to have 4 different actors portraying a live action Bruce Wayne. We're also going to have a brand new Batman animated series with Batman the Caped Crusader. And we're going to have a video game based off of the Bat family taking place in Gotham. Yeah. So a lot of that should just show people why this character gets pushed into the spotlight and why he dominates pop culture as much as he does, because at the end of the day, he's his own brand and he doesn't have to rely on the DC banner being put for people to come see it. People are going to come see Batman because it's Batman.
I mean, I think one of DC's problems is uniting fans behind the media, behind these characters. Like you mentioned, Marvel took a lot of chances, and in the beginning, you could argue that these chances were not really paying off, but they stuck with it over a period of time. They played the long game, where it allowed it to build up its reputation, where now, like, for example, they could do something like Guardians of the Galaxy, who were obscure as hell characters.
Yeah.
Bank. I mean, just think about that for 1 second. This is how bad DC is at uniting its fan base behind its films. If you were told, like, 15 years ago that the first Justice League movie was going to come out and the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie were going to come out, and that Guardians of the Galaxy was going to be a bigger hit than Justice League, nobody would take you seriously. They'd probably laugh at you for even suggesting something. It would sound completely ludicrous. But Marvel has done a good job of building itself up as a brand where it no longer has to worry about how obscure the characters are. Just the fact that it's associated with the MCU is enough for people to get
excited.
Okay. DC has to rely on Batman. They're not successful at uniting fans behind the DCEU. Fans are really split. I'm up and down with it as it is. I love Zack Snyder's Justice League, but I don't really care for Batman versus Superman. but it doesn't seem they haven't had the ability to unite the fan base around that banner the way that Marvel has. So they have no option. Sometimes they're like, well, if we want to compete with DC's with Marvel's money, make another Batman movie that's going to make $1 billion regardless. So I think if DC wants to like not rely on Batman so much, they have to kind of try to play the same kind of long game that Marvel or the MCU did.
Yeah, they'd have to create an actual universe, because I think that's the problem, that like you see something like Suicide Squad, and yeah, it's implied that it's in the same universe, but we don't really see much crossover there. And people are still like, wait, is that actually in the universe? Like, I have people that ask me, or like Joker, for example, that came out. Like, they're like, oh, is this part of the DCEU? I have to explain, no, this is a separate story. Like, it's not. And I don't think we would really see that with the MCU, but that's because MCU has been able to get all the characters under one umbrella now, right? Like, it was very clear cut that like the X-Men universe was not part of the MCU, and they were very clear about that for until obviously they got the rights to the X-Men. But I don't think that the owners of the DCEU are actually saying that outright, right? They're like, oh, here's another Joker movie. Oh, here's another Batman. Oh, we also have the Titans series over here, which is in a part of like this multiverse, and they did a crossover with the Arrowverse. And so I think there's just like too much confusion there.
Exactly.
Even like so to do like an introduction to a smaller character in like one of those properties, I don't know how well that would fare out if they went on and did their own thing. So obviously now with HBO Max, they can kind of push all their content into one location, and people have more of a pick on what they watch. But I think with the MCU and now with Disney Plus, it's just easy to just click on the Marvel button and you see, all right, all of this is in the MCU. And then at the bottom, they have like the legacy stuff that's all X-Men and previous stuff previous to the MCU.
Yeah, Marvel stuff that doesn't have a connection to that universe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also this could be out of sheer luck, and it's a generational thing. There's 2 TV shows that have helped Batman to kind of like put its claws in the dominance of pop culture. One of them is the 60s television show. As much as some people are going to want to shit on it or hate on it, and I understand it, it's campy. It doesn't take the mythos very seriously. And
it's awesome.
I think it's cool. I actually like that version. Do I think that should be the main version of Batman? No. But it made it such a cultural mainstay in the 60s, and it's such a big generational thing that its pop culture status hasn't really slipped. Then if you fast forward to the 90s, the animated series is iconic to a generation of children. For people like us, millennials who grew up, idolize that show. It is one of the most venerated, talked about cartoons from that era. And I think those 2 shows have kind of generationally since the 60s have helped Batman's iron grip on pop culture never really to completely loosen up. I don't know if that's luck. I mean, there is a Spider-Man show. I know the Spider-Man show is popular, and I know that they had a good 90s Spider-Man show, but I don't think that it had the same impact on pop culture that Adam West's 60s Batman or 90s Batman, the animated series, did.
No, but I do think that Marvel, like in its own like bubble, I think the Spider-Man series and even the X-Men series from the 90s, I think both of those really made an impact and solidified who the popular heroes were going to be for Marvel at the time. Because look at the first, like some of the first big name movies that we had around Marvel. It was the Spider-Man, the original trilogy, and the X-Men series. Like those were the big movies that came out like the beginning of the superhero era.
Those are the ones that studios saw as the most bankable, the ones that have
exactly,
the ones that are guaranteed to draw the audiences into them.
Yeah, and I think I like the X-Men series. I think they did a really good job too at slowly introducing lesser known mutants that have their own like one of my favorite X-Men is Kitty Pryde. And I think they did a really good job of introducing her to the mythos and showing like where she fits into everything, because I love her character in the stories, and she has her own comics too, and I thought that was really cool. And I didn't know who Kitty Pryde was until I saw her in the movie, and I looked her up. I was like, oh, I'm gonna read some more about her.
Mm.
And so I do think, again, kind of going back to the original the original topic, is like having these bigger known heroes and even like groups of heroes are going to be able to pull up others, right? But I do also think that we need to make sure, I don't know how much we can actually do as fans, but I think studios need to pay attention and see that there is a taste for lesser known heroes out there too. Like it's not just Batman. Like I want to see other heroes. Yeah, like we're getting Blue Beetle. That's awesome. When I heard that, I got super excited, and I thought that was really cool. And I think there's a thirst for more of that, right? Like we saw how many people were talking about Invincible, and no one knew who. No one knew that story. No one knew who he was, but people tuned in. Or The Boys. Like I read The Boys comics, but my wife didn't, and she watched the series with me and she loved it, and she's like, "This is awesome." So I think studios really need to take a chance on more heroes, because there's so many stories out there that really needs to be told, and seeing it on a big screen, or even like I guess streaming might be considered small screen, but seeing it as a movie, like in live action, I mean, a lot of those I feel they would do really well. I think it'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Go on, Nick.
No, go ahead.
I think another element that I think is that helps Batman's popularity spread so far is, earlier I mentioned it has elements that go outside of traditional comic books, like the crime level, the mafia elements. It also has horror elements.
Oh yeah.
that in and of itself, having a heavy horror element and villains like the Joker could function as a horror movie villain. Heath Ledger's take on that character, to me, for all intents and purposes, functions almost like a horror movie villain would function. So I think it's just having such different elements that you don't normally see in a whole lot of comic books, which are more sci-fi fantasy based, is able to draw on audiences who would normally never consider a superhero story. I would ever consider a comic book. Hey, but Batman has psycho villains and he's cool and it's dark. It has an appeal that goes, I think, beyond just comic book audiences or fantasy audiences.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what the MCU also tried to do, though, with their first movies, right? Like you had Iron Man that was sci-fi, then you had Thor that was fantasy, and Captain America that was like a period piece. And so you have all these like showing these are kind of different genres, but they're all superhero archetypes, and this is them coming as a whole. And yeah, I mean, as far as like a horror movie vibe, obviously Batman would I would love it if they made a Batman horror movie. I know I said that I don't want as much Batman, but seeing a Batman like horror movie, like actually like screenplay and direct it as a horror movie would be so awesome.
Have you read Arkham Asylum, a serious house on a serious earth by Grant Morrison?
Yep.
No.
Okay, look at the artwork for that and like read that story. That is a straight out horror comic, and the story that it tells is extremely, extremely disturbing. That would function very well as an atmospheric horror movie that would probably get under your skin and make you very, very uncomfortable. So yeah, Batman would make for a great horror movie. And I know, because it's another thing I do. I'm really involved in the horror community, and I know a lot of people in horror who fucking love Batman, who get excited for Batman content the same way they get excited for horror movies. So I can confirm it does actually reach into that other niche too.
And I think it's more so what Jimmy had said in the very beginning too, where Batman is just a very relatable character. He's an easy sell for WB. They don't have to have a huge marketing campaign or some kind of tie-in to explain who this character is. It's just a billionaire playboy who had tragedy strike him, and now he fights crime as a mass vigilante. It's an easy selling point for people to latch onto, as opposed to someone like Superman, who was an alien who crash landed on Earth to escape his home world, and he is solar powered, so now he has these incredible powers who can do anything. I think it's just easier from that standpoint to where the general public who doesn't know comics, and obviously there's way more to Superman than just that. We know that as comic lovers and people who know so much about characters, mythology, and history. But as far as the general public, because that's also something that people aren't really aware of or they're not really thinking about, companies have to think from a general public standpoint, and if they can't just appeal to comic book fans, there has to be some kind of selling point for a character, some kind of interesting notion about them that can get people flocking to the theaters or to get high rates and high viewership on shows. And
let's put it this way, releasing anything Batman for Warner Brothers is just like printing money for them.
Exactly.
You think about it.
Exactly. And I do agree with Eric. I'm somebody, I love Batman. Batman's my favorite character without a doubt. But I would like to see DC, Warner Brothers take more chances in bringing more obscure characters, less popular, more obscure characters into the limelight, because it gets to a point of people don't want to see Shazam, which is a great movie. Because, I don't really trust in Warner Brothers, like DC live action movies suck, so I don't really trust Warner Brothers, or Aquaman, but Aquaman broke $1 billion, but I think that was more because that had a branding associated with it because of Jason Momoa. Everybody loves Jason Momoa. But
here's another thing. I would argue Aquaman is not really quite as obscure, mostly because before Jason Momoa, he was a punchline. Most pop culture treated
he was a meme.
He was a big punchline. So I know that isn't the best branding.
Of course, but
it's widely known, coupled with this actor who everybody thinks is so cool, so badass, and every woman is in love with. So it only is natural that it becomes a different narrative. Like Jason Momoa is going to redeem the most made fun of or the most clowned on superhero in history. Versus bringing somebody out that people don't know, period. So Aquaman may not have had a good reputation, but it was a far-reaching reputation.
Yeah, and I think for me, I would like to see them, because like I said, there's so many people I talked to, oh yeah, Shazam was good. Oh really? I didn't want to see it because I don't trust DC, and I don't trust anything non-Batman related that they do, which is obviously the complete polar opposite of what the MCU is doing, where it got to a point of where Guardians of the Galaxy only made $100 million less than Batman vs. Superman. And we're talking about the world's finest, DC's two most popular characters. That's just crazy that ended up happening.
Wonder Woman's first live action appearance.
Exactly.
Movie too. So even with that even that makes Guardians stiff competition when it has everything going against it. It should not have come that close. But like I said, Marvel's done a good job where the MCU is such a brand that as long as the general public knows that this story takes place in that universe, they could care less how obscure these characters or how minor these characters are. And DC has a lot of work to do before it can even approach getting to that point. Yeah. Now, I do think it is possible with HBO Max that they might actually start to hit more of their stride. And I feel like the television market and streaming is going to open up a lot of new avenues. But what I would see happening is if DC is successful at branching out and, creating different characters and selling them, I don't really think that's going to slow Batman down. I think they will produce just as much content. Just now you get all this content too. So I don't really see that like them ever replacing that.
Yeah. And I think a good indication of that was just how good, and you're gonna say, oh, of course, it's obvious you would say something like that, Jimmy, but what really goes to show and is hopefully a good indication of what I started becoming more trustworthy, that maybe DC Warner Brothers is onto something, and maybe there's going to be good things to come with other content that they produce, was just how good Doom Patrol was that first season. I haven't seen the second season, but just from a storytelling, acting perspective, and just the grand scope of how good that show really was, there was just a lot of potential. And that, I'm like, it was funny because they had built up that was when the DC Universe app was still new, and that was when Titans was built up. Like all the marketing was going towards Titans. Was, hey, we're going to start a brand new streaming service. Titans is going to be on there, and it was like Doom Patrol didn't really get any heavy marketing, but Doom Patrol was way, way better than Titans. And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, why did they not push this show more? This is way better. And that, obviously, it's funny me saying that because obviously Dick Grayson, Robin, Nightwing is in it. But that show was just so great. And
that's just the thing. The Titans has a Batman connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, so I know that we mentioned that like there's a lot of Batman that was like thrown at you. I also don't think that Batman is necessarily being used to like attract people to these things. Like we haven't seen a Batman movie. Like this new movie that's gonna come out is the first movie since Batman vs Superman, right? And I think we know Batman to such a good point now that we don't need Batman to be like we don't need to hear the whole story again, right? Where you can put Batman, like I think he show up in Suicide Squad for like a brief moment
at the end.
Yeah,
talking to Amanda
yeah. He doesn't even show up as like Bruce Wayne. It's just it was Batman. Someone's in the Batman costume, and people get excited. It's like, oh, cool, it's Batman. But that's it. Like I don't think it's taking the limelight away from anyone. And even in like the Justice League, like yeah, Bruce Wayne had a very important role in that movie, but he wasn't like the focal point of that movie. And I think they're doing a good job at using Batman strategically, and I don't think they're overusing him, right? Like it's not like they're coming out with a new Batman trilogy. They haven't announced anything like that, right? And
well, Pattinson's I think is supposed to be listed as a it's supposed to be a trilogy or continuous movies being made about it.
Yeah.
Battinson. If Ben Affleck was Batfleck, that's Battinson.
Yeah.
Like
the two other Batman live actions that we're getting, they're part of the Flash movie.
Yeah.
Right. So again, I think that goes back to me thinking that the DCU is using Batman correctly. And whereas the MCU kind of used their big names like after the fact, right? Like they brought in Spider-Man afterwards, obviously because of the deal with Sony. But like Daredevil had a show versus coming out in the movies, and that's a big MCU name also.
Here's another thing about the MCU. What I think advantaged them was the fact that early on they wanted to capitalize on the new comic book wave that was coming, so they sold the movie rights to Sony for Spider-Man, and then the rights to Fox for X-Men, and those were probably their two biggest properties prior to the MCU.
Yeah.
I think being deprived of those properties and not being able to use them actually forced them as a company to build themselves as a brand. So at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure if it were up to them, they would have had Spider-Man.
That's true.
From the beginning, they would not.
Exactly.
We'd have totally have never kicked it off with Iron Man. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But I think the company being deprived of those characters for so long probably really benefited them in the long run. I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense
because they were able to build a brand off of good stories, good characters, and actually focused on the narrative at hand, and not so much on this is Spider-Man. People love Spider-Man, so we're making a movie because you people love him. And it took some time, obviously, because when we talked about from the very beginning of Phase 1 until Phase 2, there was a drastic jump in consistent box office numbers for them with every film that came out. So I think that was probably – that worked out in the long run for them. Yeah. Because obviously they were going to get their characters back at some point. And they're doing that now. With the only character they don't have full rights to is Spider-Man and his characters, right? Well, only characters.
I mean, even
Hulk too. I'm sorry,
but now officially part of the
MCU. He just is probably not going to have a solo film. I think is what they said. That deal is supposed to be that Universal doesn't want to produce another solo Hulk movie,
which is fine.
Yeah,
I'm a Hulk fan, and I think that's fine.
Yeah, but for me, I won't say stealing the limelight, but just. It seems like their direction or their attention isn't focused on bringing new characters, bringing more into them into pop culture, like characters like Captain Atom, Plastic Man, The Question. Like those are characters I would really like to see in a live action setting, or having their own animated show or something, because those are great characters who have a long-standing history in the DC universe. And if you're as much as I love Batman, would I like to see that? Yeah, of course I would love to see that.
Mm-hmm.
I love the Atom. I would love to see him show up in some way as a live action.
In a way, I guess they kind of are using Batman the way that Eric mentioned, but to draw him in, because I mean, almost all of the buzz about the upcoming Flash movie has revolved around Batman. I think that's anytime people getting excited or buzzing about the new Flash movie, it almost universally revolves around Batman. But at the end of the day, it's going to bring a lot more attention and popularity to the Flash, because a lot of people who, I mean, I know he's not the most obscure. Obviously, he's not. He has a television show and he's pretty popular. He's not the most obscure comic book character by a mile, but he's not the most popular, one of the most popular ones either. So I think in the long run, Batman being such a big selling point for the Flash movie is probably going to make a lot of new fans of the Flash, just by the fact that you're going to be dragging people who would only coming to see this.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Hold on. You said the Flash isn't in the top DC heroes?
No. I didn't say that. I think he's very popular. I just don't think he's quite as popular as Spider-Man or Superman or Batman or Wonder Woman. I needed clarify. He is more popular than the majority of superheroes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. By far.
Yeah. Because I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this is that first introduction to the character where you realize what he can actually do. Wait a minute, the Flash runs so fast he can run back in time, or he can alter even wait, what? He can create a new timeline? People just think he can run at supersonic speeds or something like that.
I feel like having Batman be such a big selling point in the Flash movie could turn the Flash almost like Iron Man. And mind you, the Flash was a bigger character pre-media before Iron Man was, but I can see having the same kind of effect where Flash would probably get an elevated presence in pop culture and probably gain a lot of new fans just because the movie features Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck as two different Batman.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because that's also something that the comic book store that I visited that's in the area that I live, it was actually keeping up with the times, and they were being smart. They were when you walk through the door, on the left, they had comics that were inspired by the shows that are currently going on. Like they had the run of Sam Wilson as Captain America right there on the stand, and then they had House of M, and they had some of the other inspirations that were for WandaVision. So it's also pretty funny too. That's a way for comic book stores to capitalize on people searching the source material are venturing in, because the coworkers I had with me, they walked through this is the inspiration for WandaVision, this is the inspiration for the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So I also think from that standpoint it is good, because then you can have people who are looking at the source material because they were so inspired, they like the stories or they like what they've seen, they like what they experienced, and then they wanted to learn more. They wanted to check out the source material, see how it checks out to the story that they had seen and they had been told.
Yeah, I think, I guess in conclusion, I would say that overall, Batman, yes, we get a lot of Batman, but in the end, it's a good thing, and we don't think it's going to take away from other characters. Obviously, it's going to be able to pull other characters up. Same with Spider-Man. Same with all these big names in the Marvel universe. Yeah, I think there's enough room, right? There's enough room to have these head honchos at the top, and then have all these other heroes trickled in.
Yeah,
I agree.
It was ironic too, because like I said, what started this conversation was looking at the comments in the promo for Batman Soul of the Dragon, but Batman had gotten top billing because it's Batman, but it was about Richard Dragon, it was about Lady Shiva, it was about O-Sensei and Ben Turner, aka Bronze Tiger. So it's actually kind of funny that
was a totally different story. Yeah,
it was kind of fun. It was more of playing on the martial arts aspect of the DC world, because that was cool for me seeing that, because me as a martial artist, I love seeing those characters that
is practical martial arts too.
Exactly. But yeah, you missed that part. I was waiting for you. But So it was kind of ironic for me that that's where this conversation started. I'm like, I'm like, do you not missing what the story is about? Like, it's about other characters. It isn't just focused on Batman. Yeah, Batman had top billing, but they couldn't just call it Bronze Tiger, Soul of Dragon. No one like what? Batman, Soul of Dragon. Oh, okay. Well, it's that sounds interesting. Like, it's a good way to just for marketing purposes to get people behind it, but also introducing other characters like we hadn't really seen before, and also really good characters part of this universe. So it, like I said, I think from that perspective, it is good because it serves as an introduction and a lens for people to get to know these characters.
It's a lens, in my conclusion, it's a lens, it's a gateway, and it's what made me a comic book fan, a larger comic book fan in general. But I mean, as somebody who loves the Batman universe, like absolutely adores, it's my favorite piece of fiction, period.
Yeah.
I cannot complain that much because I feel spoiled. I feel like I have no shortage of content. If I don't have comic books to read, there's like more than 30 animated films I could go to. There's multiple TV shows. There's multiple live action films. I feel like as a Batman fan, kind of lucky. I feel like there is no shortage of content. I even get overwhelmed looking at it sometimes. Like, geez, how am I ever going to get through all of this? And it's easy too. I love Batman. And like, if I'm bored and I want to watch something and I'm not trying to like, I like watching new movies and different things, but it's easy to fall back into the universe. Sometimes you just want to see something that you're familiar with. And I could watch a Batman story or read one
always
and be happy. Since I was a child, I don't ever picture myself ever getting sick of that character for the rest of my life, no matter how much it oversaturates pop culture, no matter how much they do it. My 30 years of my life, I've never gotten sick of it. I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah, same here. I mean,
yeah,
I think I concur with you greatly on that.
This is the history of Batman right here.
And with all that being said, stop complaining about Batman, all you guys in the comments and keyboard warriors and people who just don't like Batman, because he's a pop culture powerhouse and he's not going anywhere.
No way.
I feel
Batman ornament.
I feel kind of out of place because I unintentionally wore a Captain America shirt, and you guys are all wearing Batman.
I want to point that out, but Nick, you have a lot of Batman shirts and Nike shirts like that. I was very perturbed to see the Captain America shield on you.
I did my hair without realizing that I was wearing a Captain America shirt, and I just was assuming I would block it out or frame it out. Can we just edit the rest of that part out and just keep it like this? I can't.
No, I'm keeping it.
With all that being said, thank you guys. This was a great discussion. And I think next week we're going to be reviewing All-Star Superman, the comic.
Yes. So that'd be great.
Love that.
And make sure you guys follow us on Instagram at heroesandmutants.com. Make sure you also follow Higher Passion. Check out our other podcasts like Eric's podcast, the Quick Scope podcast, Rap Beats and Melodies, Sports Dogs. We have one on relationships, one on conspiracy theories.
Positively sensual. And
faded theories, right?
Faded theory, yes.
Faded theories.
A lot of good content to come, and make sure you tell your friends about us. Follow us on IG to find out the developing news. And we're going to be doing a raffle on IG also. It's going to be a painting of the Batman Rogues Gallery, and it's going to be a good one. So make sure you guys check that out. Tell people about it, and we will see you next week. Take care.